Okay, thanks, Hannah. John Kaye has just arrived. Welcome, John. Thanks very much for being here. And you arrive at a very opportune moment, because the topic that I wanted to perhaps move on to next, which of course is not unrelated to the notion of competition, is the notion of management. Because one of the striking things about the current higher education environment is the extent to which this intense drive to make competition the be-all and end-all of universities' life has been accompanied by intense ideological and propaganda effort to suggest that really the nature of the modern university is one that's predicated on collegiality, teamwork, values which are quite different from those of the bald and bloody competition that actually prevails. So I wanted to perhaps ask Robert and John, and perhaps John first in particular, about the way in which management plays a role in this, and the role of management in universities more generally. Because of course, one thing that you might want to say about the very notion of management is that it's a deeply inhuman way of construing relationships within a university. Management is arguably something that has to happen to problems, not to people. And it's also a relationship which, in a strange way, withdraws a sense of agency, or withdraws the agency from the managers themselves, because managers are people who we conceive of as essentially having a procedural, mission to manage within an agenda which they don't set. And I think that we can see, that that's exactly the situation that exists in universities. Vice-chancellors and their subordinates have shown a signal of failure to actually lead universities, and have adopted accommodation as their principal mode of politics within the higher education sector. So I'm just wondering if those observations might, serve to trigger some thoughts about the nature of management, the nature of leadership in the current university context, and the way it might be influenced by social pressures outside it. John?
Well, I'm a little bit offended that just because I turn up here in a suit, you assume I'm an expert. Comes with the territory of my day job. And I also do apologise for being late. I haven't heard what's gone on before, so I may well end up repeating things that have happened before. Mind you, being a politician, as the current crisis gripping universities demonstrates, being a politician, I'm probably not that good at listening anyway, so it wouldn't matter whether I speak or not. I think everything you say, Nick, is absolutely correct. Managerialism is about managing problems, not managing people. But everything you said, I like the way you frame a question and give the answer, and then I have to tick off on it. So I do. Teaching has changed since I was at university. I was expected to cover the answer ourselves. But I seriously want to add another dimension to this, which is it's not just about the human versus institutional problem dimension. There's another dimension of managerialism where it doesn't work, and that's to the very mission of what a university is about. And I taught at a university for 23 years, taught engineering. I then went off and became a politician. So I'm used to dysfunctional organisations, having tried to run the state of New South Wales. I can say this, that there is a mission to universities which is entirely forgotten by the current debate. It's forgotten by the debate that Julia Gillard and Barry O'Farrell are engaged in with the Gonski reforms. And before somebody bites me, yes, I do think that more money for public education is a good idea. In fact, I've spent the last 20 years of my life arguing for more money for public education. But I also consider universities to be part of public education, and robbing a poor Peter to pay a poor, and along the way siphoning off money to go to some very rich Justins and Sarahs off at private schools makes no sense at all. But the mission of a university, which is being forgotten, is that of scholarship, which is beyond simply a dollar value, and it's beyond actually management. You can't manage scholarship. You can manage a sausage factory, you can manage something which emits into a simple microeconomic model, but scholarship does not, and I probably offended our friends and colleagues in the meat workers union, and I apologise for that, but you can't manage scholarship, it just doesn't work. The notions of the creation, the guardianship and the promulgation and the transmission of knowledge and the promotion of knowledge and wisdom and understanding and deep understanding of society doesn't work within a Taylorist management model. There's ample experience of what's happening at universities. There's the tension that exists between staff and university management demonstrates that. The second big mission of universities is education. And I reckon the two great debates of the 21st century are what the hell are we going to do about our greenhouse gas emissions, and what the hell are we going to do about the legacy of neoliberalism and education? How are we going to escape from the idea that education is a business, that knowledge is a commodity, that students are clients? And it's simply, none of those things work. There's even numbers, believe it or not, that prove that. If you look at the greatest practitioner of managerialism in school education was a guy called Joel Klein, who came out of Coca-Cola or IBM or something, some other corporation, became the Chancellor of the New York School District, introduced all these managerialist ideas of, measurement and sacking people who weren't doing well and so on, all oriented on the common test results. And in fact, his common test results went down, not up. So even by their own measure, it's a failure. And the third mission of the university is that of service. Service in the form of social critique, service in the form of innovation, service in the form of ideas, that service that universities, the universities give to the community. And that service doesn't come about, I don't think, because of money or because of obligation. That service comes about and works only where there is a genuine commitment, goodwill, that commodity, that neoliberalism, that microeconomics simply cannot deal with. That sense of commitment that individuals have to their society, that sort of collective feeling of what works and what doesn't work. So on all three measures, I think apart from the answer you gave me, the other answer I'd give is managerialism is actually completely contrary to the very essence of what a university should be doing.
Do you want to say something about that, Robert? Or sorry.
Yeah, I could say a lot about it. I'll try and restrain myself. Look, one thing I've kind of looked at in some detail is the question of management ethics. Right? And long story short, they don't exist. You simply, when you look at all the work on the way managers behave or the sociology of management, what comes out time and again is that you simply cannot rely on some kind of internalized ethic or ethos that managers have. There are things about the structural position that people end up in that almost always pushes them in a particular direction. So as soon as any of us get into any of those positions, it becomes almost impossible not to behave in particular kinds of ways. It's a bit like, being a lawyer in the Nazi regime, right? You just can't do it. There's something about the structure of the situation that pushes you in a particular way, which means that we cannot rely on the ethics of people in those management positions. The only thing we can rely on are institutional constraints that basically compel people to behave in a particular kind of way. Now, the other thing I wanted to say was, I think Hannah could probably chime into this too, is we have to have a sense of how long this has been going on, right? At least Dawkins, right? Possibly before, but certainly since Dawkins. So, which means how deeply rooted these kind of changes in university life are in Australian culture. A lot of this comes from Canberra. I often got the feeling that there are a lot of people that really hated universities that ended up working in the Department of Education and they've been on this project ever since, right, to pull us into line and to make us behave in particular kinds of ways, and to thinking of ever more kind of ingenious ways of thinking of ways of auditing us and making us accountable, tying what we do to the money that we get and so on, to try and govern us from a distance, right? It's a terrific example of that notion of governing from a distance, from supposedly giving universities autonomy to do what they want, but to establish the rules in such a way that they all end up going the same way, right? And that's another observation that all the literature makes, the incredible similarity between, across the whole higher education sector in the Western world, that they're all moving in the same way. I think they all go to the same conferences or something, and they all come up with the same kinds of ideas. And that what's going on is this particular kind of ethos, and again, other people can talk about this in more detail, that all organisations are basically the same. Right? That it doesn't matter if you're manufacturing widgets or whatever. they all work the same way, and the same principles can be applied, and so people get employed to operate in that part of the university, in human relations and management. Those sectors keep growing and growing, and that's another thing I keep observing, is the sheer rabbit-like proliferation of those kind of sectors in the university. They take on a life of their own, and there comes a point where, as parasites, the parasite actually ends up eating the host. And in a way, I think that is a large part of what's going on.
I think you wanted to say something, Erima, and then Anna.
Yeah, I mean, I think managers are doing us a favour really, because they give a face, that allows us to personify the disasters that are going on in the education sector, and put their faces on t-shirts and placards and banners and go, bang pots and pans outside their doors and make up, rhyming chants and memes about the daily kind of email that gets deposited into our student email boxes from the Vice Chancellor that no one can actually reply to, but we just have to accept, that this message is coming down from management and telling us, that it's not their fault, they're doing the best they can. But I guess just a couple of stories from Sydney Uni that I think show that what is happening is that not just that people are being forced into managerial roles, as you were saying, Robert, but actually that managers are literally being brought in from other sectors, whether that's the insurance sector or, that's the case with with the new Chancellor, Belinda Hutchinson, at this university. Her background is insurance. In the architecture department, students are currently in battle trying to get 5 hours of studio time that was just cut by a new Dean of Architecture who has no architecture experience, no background in architecture whatsoever. And just the level of alienation between students and, the staff in that faculty who are engaged in a project that they're passionate about, that is being cut by someone who has no concrete understanding of what studio time actually means or what an architecture degree is or should be, I think, is creating a huge amount of anger and resentment. But I suppose the other point I wanted to make is that there's also a danger in falling into that trap of seeing this or that individual as a bad manager, and I think that's a phrase that we should just throw out the window, bad management, because it is any kind of management that's the problem. But the managers are necessary because of federal funding being withdrawn and the necessary competitive existence that the university is now under. Who's going to manage that? Who's going to manage the ongoing existence of Sydney University in a competitive environment where everyone else wants to snap it down? Someone has to manage that process, and it's very convenient for the university managers to turn around and blame the government, and then turn around and be the ones who manage implementing the cuts. And similarly, the government can withdraw the funding, but then kind of brush their hands of actually the particular consequences of that. And it's a very manipulative process where it's hard to pin the blame. And that process even goes further. So in the biology department here at Sydney Uni 2 years ago, the Dean of Science said, you've reached your limit, you've got to cut back 2% or 3% or whatever it is, but actually we're going to let the senior staff members make that decision. So then those senior staff members have to sit in a room squabbling over who's going to lose their job or which courses are going to go or where the funding is going to come from. And that creates a huge level of angst and resentment, amongst the staff and also the students. Who do they blame? Who do they go to? Where is this fight? And I think that's a process that we actually have to be quite aware of, the way that it is manipulatively used to kind of hand the blame to someone else and someone else and someone else, and it is actually the entire shifting structure that needs to be challenged.